Hi, I'm Jason Gorber from thatshelf.com, and we're here to talk about God's Country. So God's Country is one of the 2022 Sundance films. It stars Thandiwe Newton. Want to make sure that I'm getting that right. Jeremy Bob, Joris Jarski, Jefferson White, Kai Lennox, and Tanya Beatty. It's directed by Julian Higgins, and it's an interesting neo-noir. Not neo-noir, it's a neo-Western, but it has noir elements too. Sure, why not? But it's essentially this really interesting tale. It actually is based on a short story of a professor who's sort of a late middle-aged dude, a retiring guy who goes, is in the middle of nowhere, and then ends up being in this dynamic with a bunch of hunters. And so the narrative has been shifted to Thandiwe in a really interesting way, because it brings in all kinds of other aspects and elements of her character, not only being a woman, not only being a woman of African descent, but also the dynamic of her actually being a Katrina survivor, and the dynamic of bringing New Orleans in the middle of nowhere, the sort of mountainside, the dynamic between the sort of white trash hunters and their dynamic and their church dynamic, and the New Orleans connection. And so when you have this sort of dynamic at play, it's really interesting. And what's particularly fascinating is that so many of the racial dynamics that are absolutely made overt are done on her professorial element, not in the element overtly with the people that have come to sort of not care of exploiting her land when they actually go to hunt. It's one of these things that's sort of the death of a thousand cuts kind of narrative. The things sort of build up and escalate and escalate and escalate. Somehow feels relatively believable as it sort of goes along. That even when you are requesting assistance from law enforcement in an environment like this, it's just meant to be played by different rules. But again, I love the dynamic that she's from New Orleans, which is in itself is this own unique ecosystem, as it were. This place where her past very much reflects a complexity of a circumstance that she abandoned in order to go to this new, supposedly safer environment, and just sees things escalate and escalate. The whole film relies upon her performance. It needs to show the sort of anger, how she's sort of losing it, how the decisions she's making are not rational and yet believable. She makes some terrible decisions and yet we're sort of rooting for her. And all of this sort of plays out in this sort of this canvas. It's very beautifully shot. The performances are particularly strong, especially from those people actually who are playing against her, which again could have come across as sort of cardboard characters. But in a funny way, they remind you the best of somebody like Peckinpah, where you sort of almost understand the ferocity of those from the outside. There's a beautiful moment in a church actually where you actually think that things are sort of reasonably going to be resolved because each of them sees in each other themselves, if that makes any sense. The sort of grand narrative plays out sort of step by step, but it's really the character development that brings the film its richness. It's not a total home run. I think that there's certain things that sort of get dragged on, and certain moments that are quieter than they should be, certain loud moments that I would have liked to have been a bit quiet. But it's all there. We have all of these tiny little moments that sort of echo much larger themes, everything from the way that hiring practices go, to the exploitation of teaching assistants, to the way law enforcement works, to the way the whole notion that liberty and freedom, and whether or not that gives you the right to actually go against someone else's wishes. All of this stuff is at play here in God's Country, and I definitely think that it's something that is pretty special out of this year's slate. So there we are, Sundance 2022 film God's Country. I hope you have a chance to see it. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Please like, please subscribe, please let us know in the comments what you think, and we will see you next video. All the best. Take care.